Workers at Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant are evacuated after it tests 10 million times more radioactive than normal. Rebels in Libya say they've captured the eastern town of Brega from Gaddafi's forces. Water at one of the reactor buildings at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan has tested 10 million times more radioactive than normal, and the Nuclear Safety Agency says it's highly possible the water's coming directly from the reactor itself. Fukushima's operators said workers have been evacuated from the number 2 reactor building to prevent exposure to radiation. Our correspondent in Tokyo is Mark Worthington.
The very, very high reading, quite a disturbing number, 10 million times, is talking about a pool of water within the turbine building, which is part of Reactor 2. It's contained within that building. This is not a wider finding in the seawater or anything like that, but because the levels are so incredibly high, the 10 million times is compared to the normal level of radiation you'd find in water in a nuclear power plant. It's because of that there is so much concern about precisely what's happening at Reactor 2. And we've heard the Nuclear Safety Agency here say that they think it's likely that water is coming directly from the reactor itself, that the radioactive particles within it indicate that that they have been involved in nuclear fission. So that a huge concern, but it must be taken in the context of what's going on with the airborne radiation in the area. That it is decreasing according to the government, and they do say that in spite of this latest finding, they don't see any reason at this stage to extend the evacuation zone.
The authorities now say almost 10,500 people were killed after the earthquake and tsunami. Our correspondent Roland Burke is in the town of Kamaishi. That's one of the worst affected areas, and I asked him how people were dealing with the extent of the loss of life.
Well, that is a real problem. Where I'm standing now shows you the arbitrary nature of the tsunami. The house behind me destroyed, its neighbour a few paces up the hill untouched. But what's happening here today is that soldiers have been searching through the wreckage here, and every day they're finding bodies. The problem is how to deal with those bodies. They're being taken to the gym of a school just up the road, and there, if relatives can identify them, they're released for funerals. But the crematorium here can only deal with 13 funerals a day, so some people are having to drive hundreds of miles inland to places where they can hold a funeral. Inside that gym as well, though, there are 50 bodies which remain unidentified. The local government here said that by last Friday, if they were still unidentified, it would bury them in a mass grave. But people here objected to that. The normal thing in Japan is to cremate the dead. So the government has now set a new deadline of the end of the month. And if by then those bodies are still unclaimed, they will have to be put into a mass grave.
That was Roland Burke in Japan. Now, Libyan rebels are saying they've captured the coastal town of Brega in eastern Libya from Colonel Gaddafi's forces. The claims, which are pretty difficult to verify, come after the rebels retook the port of Ajdabiya on Saturday, consolidating their hold on the east. And there are reports of intensive air attacks by international forces on the road between Colonel Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte and Ajdabiya. Well, we can go live now to our correspondent Ben Brown, who joins us live. Ben, you've just left Ajdabiya. How close are you now to Brega, and what can you tell us about the road between the two?
Well, actually, Martine, we're moving quite fast, so we've come through Brega. There's nothing there in terms of Gaddafi forces. The rebels have firm control of Brega, and they've kept on steaming ahead on the road to Ras Lanuf that's down there. We're told that the front line, we haven't quite reached what is now the new front line, but it's at Agala, which is a few kilometres down the road from where we are right now. So that appears to be where the Gaddafi forces have retreated to for the time being. The rebels, after that morale-boosting capture of Ajdabiya and Brega, they now feel they've got some momentum. They're very excited. They're racing down this road. You see lots of vehicles going down there to the new front line, and they are pretty confident. But the truth is, they only got Ajdabia because coalition airstrikes came in very heavily and hit all the Gaddafi forces that were there, all the tanks, the artillery, the armoured cars, and destroyed those. And the rebels were more or less able to walk in there. The Gaddafi forces made no stand whatsoever in Brega, so it remains to be seen whether they will fight a bit harder down the road from where we are now.
And whether indeed they're going to push on still further. The next main town being Ras Lanuf, and thereafter Sirte, of course, Colonel Gaddafi's birthplace.
Yeah, that's right, and that is where I think the equation would change, because that is very solidly pro-Gaddafi. It's a Gaddafi stronghold. If the Gaddafi forces made a stand there, then you would expect that that is what they would do, and that the rebels would have a lot more trouble there, also because their supply lines would be very, very stretched indeed. It's an awfully long way from the rebel headquarters, their stronghold back in Benghazi, all the way up to Sirte. But they have great passion, they have great energy, great determination. They keep saying they're going all the way to Tripoli. But I have to say, although they're racing down this road right now, Tripoli still seems an awfully long way off.
Ben Brown, past Brega in northern Libya. There's been more anti-government protests in Syria, and the headquarters of the ruling Ba'ath Party have reportedly been burned down, that in the coastal city of Latakia. On Friday, protesters destroyed a statue of President Assad's father in the southern city of Deraa. That's all from the BBC World Newsroom for now.